Hello and welcome to PMI's Uncommon Sense podcast, tools to improve your work forever. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner with PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training firm. Our Uncommon Sense podcast is a 15-minute conversation with our expert consultants. They talk a lot of common sense, although much of it is not common practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. We want you to be inspired to improve your business through learning more about the tools which can help you succeed and grow. Barry Byrne, thank you very much for joining me on Uncommon Sense again today.
My pleasure as always, Sus. Thank you.
And today we're going to talk about SMED. And just to make sure people have heard me correctly, that is 4 letters, and it's SMED. Now, I think let's begin with, what does that stand for?
Hopefully this is going to help you better as a consequence of finding out. SMED, a single minute exchange of dies. Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling I'm in the fabric industry.
Are you feeling... okay, yeah, well, indeed. And I think what we know about the fabric industry is the variety of products. You know, if you look at a standard, having had that experience, look at the standard brochure. You know, the portfolio of products in many textile organizations is vast. There's telephone directory sizes. So I suppose if you considered an organization, as you've just mentioned there, Sus, where they have a requirement to produce different products to different volumes over the course of a day, we have to consider, so what are the challenges they face in that? Well, clearly they know what they're going to make. It's how did they get from, gents trousers waist 36 to shorts size 42?
Okay.
There are probably some better examples. SMED is actually pretty much what you were alluding to there. It is the need, first of all, to recognize that when we're moving between one product type and another, typically it requires the infrastructure, the manufacturing system to physically transform into another configuration that enables them to make another product.
Yes.
Why is this important? Of course, is your next question. Well, it's important.
Why is this important, Barry?
Thank you. because the downtime from one product. So we've completed the 5,000 parts of, and we're now moving to an entirely different product type. From the time that we finished making the last good product, the 5,000, to the time that we've delivered the first of the new variant to standard, is essentially non-value add. We're not making anything. We're not selling anything. We are literally transforming the the manufacturing system to accommodate a change of variant. So therefore, it's important, and it's costly time. All of that time has a cost, because typically we have the resource available, we have the assets available, we have the utilities being used. So consequently, it is not revenue earning time. So it's one of the metrics that underpins our OEE calculation is the time taken to change from one product to another. So we see that as a significant and potential lost cost, certainly a cost lost to the business.
Okay. And so in your experience, you talk about it being a cost, and loss to the business in the context of, how many hours there are available to work in a day, in a week, in a month. What's your experience of how much this can actually have impact?
Okay, so it depends on the complexity. I have seen on a continuum, from a relatively straightforward single minute to literally change over the equipment to, in one particular case, where the product that was to be produced, in other words, the oncoming new product, it took at least 10 times longer to set up the equipment for that product than it did actually running itself. So let's say, for example, that it would take us an hour to run this new batch of product. It took at least 10 hours. Now, there has to be a strategic financial decision made that is still viable. And I suppose, and this may be a question for another day, but it does call into question then the additional complexity we often have in our product portfolios maintaining a high product portfolio for small run items needs to be seriously considered. Is this viable? Is it profitable at the end of the day? So in financial profitability terms, that is a challenge. I think in manufacturing and engineering terms, we constantly strive to minimize the time from the rundown of the last good product to the startup of the next new product, is minimizing that time. And we do that by a multiplicity of creative. It's a great creative activity, or a series of activities, because essentially what we're looking to do very often is to, manipulate brackets, screws, washer, frames, and so on, conveying systems. The system may need to be purged, washed down, and so on. So you can see that actually there can be quite a significant amount of activity. So as an exercise, and we conduct workshops on this basis, it is extremely interesting to look at a process where we're taking potential future changes to the infrastructure and bringing them offline. In other words, we can make the changes to the infrastructure before we're ready to do that product. Sometimes we automate them. So, for example, I've seen many conveying systems that simply on the press of a button, all of the conveying systems reduce in scale. So they literally just compress in order to fit a new size bottle of shampoo or washing of some description. So it becomes, this relentless hunt for shaving off those minutes. So it's no surprise actually that the expression single minute exchange of die is actually describing the potential for us to make that change in a single minute. Right. And so I'm sorry to be absolutely direct in terms of that's where it's coming from, but it's essentially saying the goal for changeover should be within 1 minute. It's exchanging something, so we're changing one set of equipment, of brackets, or purging. And the dies expression, I think the textile one is a very good one. It classically came from automotive press shops where they were pressing physical body shapes and so on. So you can see that wouldn't have been done in a minute or two. So yeah, absolutely. It's a simple principle and a hugely creative. And in my experience, I've found operators are more than prepared to engage because they'll often have some really good ideas about how can we speed this process up. However, how do we continue to make it safe? So I think, throughout the conversations you and I have had today, Suze, is never overlooking the basic principle that it's done safely and we're not compromising anything. And I'm talking people and equipment, of course, in that way.
So presumably one begins with measuring how long that changeover takes.
Yes.
And then once you've got a strong sense of that, you've had a number of goes, different situations perhaps, and then you're then doing that creative piece that you talk so passionately about, so that they're getting together and getting the feedback from the people.
Oh, yes.
So that you can start to test some of those ideas.
Absolutely. It's so liberating, Suze. One of the things I find really useful is we video. We record it. And in recording it, it's quite fascinating that when we play back to operators who've just conducted the exercise, there's so many aha moments from them. I didn't realize that we did that. Actually, we could catch our hand, and so on. And therefore, I think you then recognize people are getting engaged in it. The basic principle I'm looking to do then is, as you just described, we video it, we've recorded it. It's not a time and motion study. We're recording the key elements within the process itself of breaking down and setting back up again. And we look at it in two ways. I'm going to be very brief here. We look at it in terms of, is this an internal step? In other words, it has to be done when the equipment is stopped. Is it internal, but it could be made external? In other words, as we're advancing towards the changeover, we haven't yet changed over. Could we do any pre-work? Could we prepare that? Okay. And that is one of the best areas of opportunity, and often the quick wins is, actually, we don't have to wait for that to shut down. And I think, certainly in my early days, what I often noticed was that the changeover happened as soon as the machine had stopped. So all of the parts arrived in, the product, a new product, but there was no sense of, why don't we bring in this product 30 minutes before we run down.
Yes.
And consequently, all of the initial stages of this changeover was essentially just assembling all the bits. And consequently, what you now see is 5S, typically 5S. All of the components for the next product are available at the point when they're required. So literally, it is drop in, drop out. And that's been my experience. There may be an initial outlay in terms of cost associated with additional die and fittings and so on, but it pays itself. It pays itself so much, particularly in terms of the minimizing this downtime. And as I said, our ambition is 1 minute, but we're constantly looking to minimize those activities that can only be done when the equipment is actually physically stopped. Yeah, so always interesting. It gets people excited because of this, the art of the possible. What sort of theories could we have and so on about this, and it's data driven, it's measurable, and we typically see results very quickly.
As you rightly said, it's just a win-win. It's a win for the organisation because they have increased opportunities for production of quality products, but it's also a win for the individuals because they just eliminate the frustrations that they had in working with that system.
Of course, because no operator likes to have to do this repetitive, having to pick up, having to change, or having to. And then many times, we consider the waste of motion. There's a lot of motion wastes in many of the changes I see. Unnecessary movement. And so it was interesting that just as you were saying that, I recall one particular production line I was engaged with. And they had an ambition for the line to continually run for 36 hours. In other words, it would not stop in all of the time. And of course, the only way that they were able to do that was to ensure that any changeovers, they could do changeovers in line. So it was seamless.
Yes.
And that was absolutely revolutionary. So actually, the line didn't stop at all. It got to such a point. And that was way outside my area of influence because, essentially the people who were designing DAOs and the creative people around there, could see it for what it is. And it also helped us to ensure that operators were doing something much more valuable, Seth. Much more valuable.
And just everyone not settling for things that are tricky or hard work or a bit difficult or, ineffective. All of this is about saying, no. We can be excellent at this and we can create such a different environment. I feel very inspired.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'll just leave you with this thought. And in practical terms, what really struck me was that the one particular production system I worked on, the operators ultimately then went to consider, and this is the very sophisticated end of TPM in many cases, They were considering how different components interacted in order to provide the product that they delivered, and therefore they were able to factor in if there had been any non-conformances to the product. They were able to determine where in the production system that had happened, and therefore had a remedial way of correcting it. They didn't need to be engineers, and this is as SMED is a subset of OEE, and OEE is a measure of optimal TPM. This is the truest TPM, where operators are able to do autonomously many of the maintenance routines that kept those production systems going for 36 hours, that the changeovers were smooth and transparent. They were planned, they delivered to the plan, and so on. It comes back to our mantras is, as you know, about predictability and certainty. It was monotonously boring in the nice sense, because therefore we could free operators up to do something that was much more sophisticated and often working on other problems in other areas of the production facility. Because very often, many times, operators did not therefore then had to attend the machine because they knew it was in a safe condition. Hugely liberating. Hugely liberating.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Barry. You have thrown a new light on that for me. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. That's great, Sis. Thank you. Lovely talking to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find more episodes of our Uncommon Sense Tools to Improve Your Work Forever in our Knowledge Hub on our website, or, of course, your favourite podcast platform. And do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode where you'll find links to more content on this topic, which includes webinar recordings, toolbox guides, blogs, and infographics, and our training page. You can always drop us a line on team@pmi.co.uk and arrange a time to have a call to talk about how these tools can help you in your organisation. We'd really love to hear from you.